Update on summer 2021 waiver extensions. We appreciate you signing up, even though this was a pretty last minute joint effort here, but we wanted to set up this time to be able to talk about these waiver extensions that were announced last week and to be able to answer questions and share some highlights about how our partners have been using these waivers. So as I said, it is a joint effort here between Share Our Strengths, No Kid Hungry campaign, the Food Research and Action Center, Feeding America, and YMCA of the USA. Just brief housekeeping. This is a webinar. It is being recorded. You are all muted and not on video. And the best way to interact with us is via the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. So we invite you to type questions at any time as we go, and we will address Q&A at the end. So introductions, I'm Carolyn Vega, Senior Manager with Share Our Strengths No Kid Hungry campaign, and I'm joined today by my colleague Emily Pia. And I am also thrilled to be speaking alongside some of our favorite national partners. Today we have Clarissa Hayes, Senior Child Nutrition Policy Analyst with the Food Research and Action Center, or Frack. Then we will hear from Stacy McDaniel, the Anti-Hunger Initiative Specialist for YMCA of the USA. And then we will hear from Maya Price, Manager of Commodity and Federal Nutrition Programs with Feeding America. So I'll be starting off the webinar just giving an overview of the waivers that are available for this summer. And then we will talk about how we see these waivers being utilized. So we'll start with Emily from No Kid Hungry. Then we'll hear from Clarissa on what's happening in the Frack network. Then we'll hear from Stacy with the Y, and then Maya with the Feeding America network. And then, as I said, we'll move into audience Q&A after that. Okay. The waivers, what we have all been waiting to hear about. I'll cover these on a few slides. So when you don't see a waiver pop up on the next slide, don't worry, it's probably coming. But the most kind of critical waivers that we were thrilled to see extended through this summer are the congregate meal service waiver, the meal service time waiver, the parent or guardian meal pickup waiver, and the area eligibility waiver. Together, these four are really the heart of these modified COVID-19 operations. These are what allow you to do the, bulk meal packs for 5 days or 7 days at a time, or at least be able to serve a breakfast and a lunch together at the same time. What allow you to do grab and go distribution, home delivery, all those different kinds of models. They allow you to give meals to parents when their children aren't present. And they give you the flexibility from that usual area eligibility requirement so that you can serve kids who are in need, even if they're not in an area that's traditionally met that 50% area eligibility threshold, and to be able to choose the meal distribution locations that really work best for you as an organization. And the meal pattern waiver. This is an important one that I want to spend a moment on. The meal pattern waiver for the summer food service program did not get extended. It is only available through June 30th. However, the meal pattern waiver for the seamless summer option did get extended along with the other waivers through September 30th. So USDA has made it clear that this was not an oversight. This was intended. That they thought supply chain issues had been resolved enough. And so they really wanted to see organizations go back to meeting at least the SFSP meal pattern for this summer. But they recognize that with the school nutrition standards that seamless summer operators follow, they acknowledge that there may still be challenges in meeting those meal pattern requirements. So the waiver is still in place for the summer for SSO. With the encouragement to still meet the SFSP meal pattern at least. So definitely be mindful of that if you're doing SFSP, your meal pattern waivers will only go through June 30th. And if you are going to have any issues with that, please don't hesitate to reach out to us or reach out to your contact who's speaking on this webinar. And we can continue to raise any issues with this or other waivers to USDA. And then the last set of waivers that I'll talk about that are available for this summer These were the original batch of waivers that were available in response to the memo rescissions, if we remember those pre-COVID. So these allow those flexibilities to extend through this summer as nationwide waivers, regardless of whether or not your state has requested this waiver. And so those are the first week site visit waiver for SFSP, offer versus serve for non-school SFSP sponsors, and area eligibility for closed enrolled sites. And then also on-site monitoring for SFSP. That was not a memo rescission. There's usually had to be on-site monitoring for SFSP, but that is a waiver that is continuing through this summer for SFSP. An important thing to note about all of these waiver extensions, they only apply to the summer meals programs for this summer. So if you have questions about CACFP or guidance for next school year that has not been released yet, USDA has said that they're working on it. They hope to release things in April, but at this time, all we can really speak to are these summer meals waivers that are available for this summer. So as a result, in terms of questions around, are we going to have to switch back to totally normal school operations as soon as the school year starts in August, even though these waivers continue to September, I would say hold tight, probably wait for that school year guidance to come out to really try to figure out what's going to happen when the school year begins in your area. But at least, you know, for as long as it is officially summer break, you will have these waiver flexibilities. So that is it for the overview. So I'm going to turn it over to Emily now, and then from there, we're going to continue to hear about how all of these waivers are being utilized across the country.
Thanks, Carolyn, and thank you all for joining this Friday afternoon if you're on the East Coast, or morning if you're on the West Coast, which is the location of the sponsor that I am so pleased to highlight today. The Von Meck Century Learning Center is a charter school out in Pacoima, California, in Los Angeles, and the school nutrition director and the team there are just rock stars at taking advantage of these waivers and making sure that kids have access to the meals that they need during school closures. And so I wanted to highlight how they've served bulk options and how they have taken advantage of the parent pickup and the non-congregate to deliver meals to families who can't pick them up in person or require special accommodations. So we think Vaughn is so great that we wrote a case study about their meal program in COVID-19. So I will share the link to that case study and encourage you all to read it. But just one of my favorite highlights is the picture on the left here. They have been serving bulk fruits and vegetables throughout the pandemic. And so it looks like a beautiful farmer's market that any of us would want to attend. And I think really restore some of the dignity in the programs and accessing free school meals. And so the kids get to choose what fruit they want for the week, and one of the staff will package them with their meals. And they've also been really creative in doing an in and out style ordering system. So prior to setting up the meal service distribution, Frances Montoya Gatewood, who's the school nutrition director there, and her team sent out surveys to parents and families asking what the best days and times were to pick up meals. And they also went a step beyond and had Zoom forums where school administrators and the school nutrition staff talked with families about maybe what barriers they might face in accessing the meals. And even more so in just expressing how important the long-term health of the school nutrition program was to really relied on families coming throughout the summertime and throughout the school closures to come and pick up meals to make sure that families were still accessing them so that they can have the same great school nutrition program once they do return back through those Zoom forums. And so they found the best days and times, which were Monday. They set up 2 different distribution times. And as a family showed up to that meal site, they would ask if they wanted a fresh, a hot, refrigerated, and frozen combo. They'd ask for a number 1. If they wanted an all frozen, they'd ask for a number 2, and they'd get meals for the week according to their preferences for their family. And another thing that I really love about Vaughn is that they make special accommodations. They're really close with their families. When I talked to Frances and her team about this program, they said everything they do is an effort of love born for their community. And so if a family reaches out to someone at the school nutrition team and says, you know, we don't have a freezer at home and we can't store these frozen meals, they will make special accommodations. They're there every day, so a family can come and pick up a hot meal every day if that works better for them. And on the contrary, if someone can't come to a site, the staff will work out a way either amongst their team or amongst the Vaughn team as a whole to get food directly delivered to a family's household. And so thanks to the waivers, all of those meals are reimbursable. And thanks to Vaughn's hard work, they're able to really make a labor of love happen and make sure kids have access to meals at this time. So I'll share the link to the Vaughn case study, but I will pass it over now to, I believe Clarissa is next with Frack. So take it away, Clarissa. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks, Emily. And it is right before lunch on the West Coast. So like the picture of the fruit just looks so good right now. But hi, everyone. So excited that so many of you chose to spend a portion of your Friday afternoon with us. We know it's been a very busy week for everyone as you're adjusting to the waiver news. But like was mentioned, my name is Clarissa Hayes, and I'm a senior policy analyst at Frack. And if you are not familiar with Frack, we are similarly a national organization working to increase access to and participation in the federal nutrition programs. And we do this through a couple different ways, mostly policy, technical assistance, and research. So we are very excited about this conversation and to share a little bit about what we know these waivers have meant to many of those in our network and across the country who are running meal programs right now. I know many of the people who are in the webinar have seen and heard and have experienced how important these waivers are. And I just want to say how thankful we are for the partnerships with the groups on the call today and others who weren't here to join us, just for the continued extension of these through the summer. So I know that we will be hearing from the YMCA and Feeding America next on some bright spots from their service providers that they represent. So I did want to just highlight a couple of opportunities that we've seen over the past year and what we see could be options moving forward as well. So the first one that I wanted to chat about is SFSP after school suppers and snacks. I know that this is technically not summer related, and I know that many people on the webinar may be thinking about, you know, schools wrapping up in a couple months, but like Carolyn mentioned, we don't know what will happen next year. And there has been a lot of flexibility around after school suppers over the last year, and just that enrichment component that's usually in place. We know that last spring that was waived. Over the last year, we've been able to do it virtually or take home. Again, we don't know what that will look like next year, but I just wanted to flag that, you know, there really is an important opportunity to leverage what has been happening over the last year and make sure that we can maintain that participation. We know just overall, this program is not reaching the need that we know exists for school lunch and school breakfast. And one key piece of this that we see and that has been really exciting over the last couple of weeks is that there has been additional funding allocated to support summer school and summer programming and after school programs through the recently passed American Rescue Plan. And what that does is provide up to $30 billion to support those underlying programs that we know provide such an important support and foundation for meals. So just moving forward, as we start to think about the summer, and you know, it still really is unknown what summer programs will look like, and therefore what summer meal programs will look like, but they really do go hand in hand. So we want to make sure that those YMCAs and Boys and Girls Clubs and Parks and Rec, all of those that were really hard hit by the pandemic are able to rebound, because we know that, you know, the learning loss and those pieces moving forward will be really critical to address along with meal access. So I did want to just flag that. Again, we don't really know yet what that will look like for next year, but I know a lot of schools and partners have been able to move into after school meals that maybe weren't able to do that before. And it's figuring out collectively and collaboratively how we make sure that that's able to continue. And then the other piece, and I know, again, Carolyn mentioned this, just the importance of the area eligibility waiver. We know that that has had a really huge impact on rural and suburban areas that maybe weren't able to participate in these programs earlier because they didn't have that concentrated level of poverty that you usually need to meet that 50% threshold for participating. And yeah, this just has been key. We know that the data that we usually use for eligibility hasn't been able to reflect what we know is happening because of COVID. So this has just really been important to ensure that all areas can participate. And we know that many of the state advocates that we work with have weighed in with their state agencies to make sure they really are utilizing this. And I would just flag that this continues because of the extension that we have to be a really important opportunity for this summer to make sure that all communities are able to participate. And I would just say from Frack's perspective too, moving forward, we're still very much in the pandemic and need this flexibility, but we are hoping that this would be able to be a permanent option moving forward on the federal level. So other than that, I wanted to just quickly highlight two state partners that we have that have been really doing innovative things around meal access. So the first one is New Mexico Appleseed, and they are a group that works across the state with the state agency to expand participation in summer and after school meals and breakfast and lunch. And they've really been working to identify areas that don't have meal sites and to create those. But one interesting thing that they've done is just making sure that meal sites are being connected to other services. And I know that's usually something that happens to some degree during the summer months, but they have been piloting, having a meal site, but then also connecting flu shots and dental care and other services and food drops to the non-congregate meal sites that are doing the school meals in the summer and after school. So I thought that was really interesting as we think about the whole child and again, the different services that families need at this time. And then the last example that I will share before moving on is from Children's Hunger Alliance in Ohio. And they are both a statewide organization, but also a sponsor of summer and after school meals. And what they've really done is stepped in as a partner with schools and with other groups like YMCAs and libraries to fill those gaps where those groups may not have the capacity. So for example, in Cincinnati, they partnered with the school district who were doing breakfast and lunch, and they added on supper service. So just really streamlining what was available, not duplicating efforts, just combining services and working really closely in partnership, which I thought was a really great example. And I think it's important too, we know how busy and how much work schools are doing, and there's an important space right now for partnership and collaboration depending on the capacity. So I wanted to highlight those. They also are working with libraries as well to provide weekends and holiday meals. So a continuation of what they normally do, but just really working to identify those gaps that have been created because of COVID. So that's it for me. I will turn it over to my partner, but I just wanted to close by just thanking everyone who's listening in. Again, we know how busy you are and know that schools and partners have been working endlessly to make these meal programs work, often changing them like on a dime over the course of a couple of days as we learn more about these flexibilities. So I've listed a couple of resources here from Frack that have come out in the last month, showing some data and some best practices. So I would recommend checking those out if you'd like. And my contact information is here as well if you'd like to get in touch after the webinar. So yeah, thank you, No Kid Hungry, for facilitating this conversation. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to my colleague at the Y of the USA, Stacey McDaniel.
Clarissa, thank you so much. Wow, I was just so amazed at the example shared by Vaughn and the opportunity for choice and accommodation for not only what you'd like to eat, but also what you have capacity to store at your home. And Clarissa, I was just steadily making notes that continued advocacy. And Carolyn had pointed out as well, these waivers are for SFSP, but we don't know what will happen for CACFP. And we know the after school meal program is so important. So I'd love to share with you today some of the examples of how the Ys use this waiver, but in all of these samples, I think you'll note that this opportunity for us to fill gaps and collaborate together to really provide those wraparound services and broader relief that's needed so much in our country is so key to the success of all of us as we really tackle 50 million Americans facing hunger. It takes all of us working together and really shoring up that support. So I'd love to share with you a few examples The first I'm going to share is out of Memphis. This is such a beautiful example of collaboration. The school actually had worst case scenario, their kitchen staff got COVID and the entire kitchens for the school district had to be shut down. During that time, they reached out to the YMCA to see if they would be able to shore that gap. And they were able to scale up from 700 kids before the schools had closed down to 23,000 kids every day. And they continued that partnership when the schools came back online, really partnered with the city who was driving vans and contributing space. And then in local communities, churches agreed to volunteer and serve and pass out those meals. They tried to set up, I believe it was almost 70 sites across the community where you could grab and go. So it was in walking distance. Parents could come and pick that up under that waiver, but also really just trying to make this as accessible and easy as possible with times that were convenient for families and varied to really shore up that gap. We really saw that utilization of the non-congregate waiver come in huge here. People didn't feel safe just yet, the parent pickup of the meals. But what we saw happen over time was it evolved, those relationships that were built. And now the YMCA was able to not only provide that meal support, but academic support when the schools went to virtual, didn't go back in person, in areas that really needed that hand. Those trusting relationships and partners helped make that possible for those virtual learning labs. And we know that this will continue this summer too. Another example of that non-congregate waiver came out of Boston. And similar to the example we heard shared from Emily about the Vaughn where they did the home delivery, Boston went this route as well. They actually had a housing authority site, and I'll share a video with you in the chat box, but they went door to door delivering these meals. Not only were they able to do the children's meals, but they got a grant from the housing authority to also provide adult meals. And they partnered up with the Boston Greater Food Bank and were able to also do bags of groceries, delivery. This expanded. It's not just the housing authority sites. It has grown so much more that they're really working hand in hand with the food bank too, and shoring up that gap, right? Using those vehicles that were used for after school and no longer are to really do food transport. All together, the city as well, stepping in there and bringing together all of these partners to see how we can better serve one another in this work. So it's been a really good collaboration all together. I was just floored when I heard my colleague Caribe eBay at the Frack conference share 4.2 million meals have been served in this last year from that YMCA and those collaborations. It's just been a beautiful utilization of what those waivers have made possible and how much they have helped children during this time. So up next, I'll go into a couple of different waivers that we've seen be effective. And one that probably is not the normal one that is featured has been just a game changer for the WISE in our network. And that is that on-site monitoring waiver. What we found happen is the pandemic happened and we had communities that wanted to do something. They may not have had a food program up and operational before, but they wanted to activate. That on-site monitoring waiver allowed a sponsoring Y within the state who was experienced with SFSP, CACFP to be able to add another Y that might be across the state under their sponsorship as a site. We saw this happen. The Capital Area YMCA in Trenton, New Jersey is sponsoring about 4 other New Jersey YMCAs, quickly activated them, got them on board. At this point, it's in, so many states across the country where we've seen this be effective. My favorite one is we saw the first model happened in Alabama. The Huntsville school system reached out to that YMCA. And, it's a struggle. You've had a captive audience. How are you going to reach all of those children now that they're not coming into the building? So they reached out to the YMCA for help. They had not had experience with this. They called, and we called the Montgomery YMCA, clear across the state, a 4-hour drive. Within 2 days, the state agency had added them as a site under Montgomery's sponsorship. It was amazing, amazing. And thank you to the Alabama State Agency for working so quickly, but they were able to feed over 1,000 additional kids in Huntsville because of that on-site monitoring waiver. And it really has successfully provided that mentorship opportunity for a new Y to learn the program and figure out the ropes of it before they pursue becoming their own sponsor. So another one is the meal service time waiver. We've talked already about some of those bulk meal options and what that means. One, it's convenient for families to get a week's worth of food, but let's talk about capacity. It's not a secret, the YMCAs across the country, for the first time in our organization's nearly 200-year history, had to close our doors. This was catastrophic. We laid off, some of the Ys had as high as 95% of our staff. So what do we do? And how do we continue to serve? Well, this option to do bulk meals and weekly deliveries was utilized by Detroit to really help them take what their food program staff and maximize that capacity, right? So they could serve one site over here on Mondays, another site across town on Tuesdays, and really effectively cover more ground in their community with that limited staff to be able to make sure that families all across Detroit had that week's worth of meals. It was a game changer and continues to be a game changer. I hope you'll join Sierra Saints Rural Child Hunger Summit, but we'll feature some more Ys that have had a lot of success with this model and volunteers. Next up is that area eligibility waiver. And this too has been a game changer during the pandemic at a time when we know those free and reduced lunch rates that were correct before probably don't as accurately represent what the community is currently in light of the pandemic. We've always had communities that were right on that threshold of the 50% free reduced lunch, but this has allowed us to be able to go in and serve. And we saw the Greater Valley YMCA in Pennsylvania move quickly. When they got news of that waiver, they called the state agency and added some sites. And, you know, I think it's shocking for us to think that sites that would not have been allowed under this rule had more than 100 kids show up that first day. And families were very honest in sharing that they had had extended unemployment, were facing extreme hardships, and really needed the help in what formerly would have been perceived as a non-qualifying area. So it has been extremely effective as we've seen this. And I do think that continued push for advocacy as we've seen this work come into play in the coming days ahead. So I will share with you more links if you'd like to dig in more with these, but I want to turn it over to my colleague, Maya Price with Feeding America. They have done monumental work, and I can't wait for Maya to share.
Thanks so much, Stacey, and thank you, as Clarissa and others have noted on the call, Jess, for you taking your time out this afternoon to be with us and to really talk through the impacts of the waivers. So hello, my name is Maya Price, and I am the Manager of Commodity and Federal Nutrition Programs at Feeding America. And just like my other partners here on the call have expressed, the waivers have been very, very crucial to our network. Since the beginning of the pandemic, when the USDA released the battery of waivers, March 2020 up until now, and as we move forward, they have really impacted all of our food banks, our 200 food banks across the network, touching children, touching families, and touching all counties of the nation. So, and especially considering now, you know, with this unprecedented time and there isn't easy access to meals, our food banks have really stepped up to take on a leadership role when schools may be closed for a certain amount of days or maybe operating virtually. So it's just been really tremendous for us to see how the waivers have impacted our network in a positive way, for our networks to operate in innovative ways and connect with so many different partners and so many different schools and so many different Ys across the United States, especially during this time. So I'll dive into just how that looks on the ground. And I will say that since the beginning, we have been tracking just practices that have taking place across our network, in which you can, that will show up in our resources that are available on feedingamericaaction.org. But I'll just spend some time today really talking about the efforts that are happening in at food gatherers in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And so as you'll see here, that the waivers have positively impacted the efforts that are happening there. And I just want to thank Markel Miller for just really sharing those insights and also presenting at the Anti-Hunger Policy Conference. So as you can see, that Food Gatherers has really partnered with the Michigan Department of Education just to really secure some of these crucial waivers. And as Stacy and others today on the call have expressed the importance of non-congregate waiver and how that shows up when families and children aren't able to come together and congregate in a congregate setting. And then how mealtime waivers and having the opportunity to distribute multiple meals at once so that children and family can go home and know where their next meal is coming from the next day. And then really having parent meal pickup has been vital, especially for families in rural communities who may not have easy access to transportation, or even families able to get to a set site. Having that multiple day pickup, parent meal access has definitely been important. And then, as Stacy has said, area eligibility and the impacts of allowing and kind of opening up the opportunity for sponsors who have never operated before to be able to operate during this time and as we move forward. So especially as we think about Michigan and just some of the high level thoughts moving forward, as you can see, these waivers are going to be very crucial, and we are leading in on our partners in USDA and others to continue to really bring the importance of these waivers to the surface, and how partnerships have played a crucial role as well, especially in rural communities. And you can see that how that's shown up in Michigan and then also all over the nation. So I won't dive into all of what we have captured, but Stacy touched on it best, and how mobile distributions has shown up, especially across our food bank network, especially as we think about how does mobile distribution show up in rural counties, how does mobile distribution show up all over the nation. And then also prepackaged boxes. Our network has been able to really utilize and distribute, again, with multiple meals, but then in different innovative models, whether that's from a grocery distribution model or other innovative and effective models to ensure meals are being distributed to children and families during this time. So I won't dive into all these practices today, but I will express the importance of these waivers and how that has really shown up on the ground across our network. So you'll see those highlighted here. And then on the next slide, I just want to express and really say again, thank you for all of your work. Since the start of the pandemic, before the pandemic, and moving forward. I do want to share with you some of our resources, as Stacy noted, teens, and how do we serve teens during this time. We have done research around teens. We just released a new report on our website around the impacts of the coronavirus on food security, so food insecurity. So please be sure to check that out, and to also visit our feedingamerica.action.org website for the latest updates. So I just want to thank everyone on the call today, and also for your time.
Thank you so much, Maya, Stacy, Clarissa, Emily. It has been wonderful to hear so many stories of partnership, of offering additional services, of meeting families where they are, making things work under tough circumstances. I don't think any of you on this webinar need to be told how critical these waivers are, but hopefully these stories have given you some extra ideas of what you can do with these waiver flexibilities for the summer. Now that we can actually start to plan, now that we actually know that we do have these waiver flexibilities. So just to reiterate, please do send us your questions if you have anything you want to try to clarify, or if you want more information on any of these ideas. So I will invite our speakers to come back. I know we got one question that has come in already, and it is, has any research been done on participation rates since the waivers have been in place? Are more meals being served? Clarissa, I think I will kick this to you. I think you've done the most formal work on this, but I certainly welcome Stacy and Maya to weigh in next based on what you've seen with your partners.
Sure. Well, I can talk about some of our reports that we've done. And then I did just see, I know SNA has been taking a look at the USDA data and putting out some really great research on that too. So if I have a second, I'll find that and put it in the chat. But I know that overall, when we look at school meals, I think during SNA said that during the first 9 months, they had about a 30% drop compared to the year before. So I would say that overall, you know, when we look at school breakfast and school lunch, there has been a drop, but we know that without the waivers, that drop would have been even greater. And then some reports that we did on our end. So we did take a look at April, which we kind of thought of the first full month of the pandemic. So we released a report on that. And we did see that there was a decrease of around, compared to the year before, around 292 million lunches in the month of April compared to April 2019, and then about 50 million breakfasts. So that was a pretty sizable drop. We know that that was also, again, schools were kind of getting used to things, really working out how operations would look. And we were actually, surprised by the breakfast numbers because the drop wasn't as severe as lunch. And we think because schools, for the most part, were giving breakfast and lunch at the same time, that it almost leveled them out a little bit more and kind of brought breakfast participation closer to lunch, which, looking at bright spots in that first month of April, kind of showed that there still are some issues for getting breakfast to kids, and that when you reduce some of those barriers, you can increase the numbers. So that's what we saw in April. And then the other report that I would quickly mention is that we did just release one a couple of weeks ago, last week, on looking at the largest 54 school districts in the country and their participation. So looking at October 2019, April 2020, and October 2020, just as the 3 data points to kind of see, during normal times, the first month of the pandemic, and then as schools have had a chance to kind of work through some of those things. So this past October compared to April, numbers were still down, but they had definitely increased from earlier in the spring. So I know that's a lot of information, but would highly recommend checking those out. We also interviewed and surveyed all the districts about what kind of model they were using, what waivers were most impactful, just different pieces like that. So that's where I would end. And then I know that Stacy and Maya have been collecting a lot of great information from their partners. So I would go ahead and turn it over to them.
Yeah, I really appreciate the formal research that Frack, Feeding America, Share Our Strength bring in. The YMCA surveyed our network of about 800 associations. On any given year, they normally serve about 27 million meals to kids. This first 6 months of the pandemic, they served 37 million. That's in half a year. So that was a 274% increase. We saw Ys like Monroe, Michigan. They went from serving 100 kids in their after-school program on Friday. The schools shut down. That Monday, they launched those distributions, drive-through sites, and they were serving 1,000 kids a day. So they scaled tenfold. Of course, you've got Ys like Memphis and in Boston, they just saw over a 10% increase. Even some of our rural YMCAs went from serving probably 40 kids, and they switched to that bulk meal delivery and really that drive-through model. And now they're serving 2,000 kids a day. That's in rural Missouri. So for us, these waivers have been complete game changers to allow us to effectively scale these programs to the kids that really need them. The beautiful part of a YMCA is we do scholarships. So many kids into programs across the country, but the reality is not every kid, even if you scholarship them, can get to these campsites, and that non-congregate and parent pickup allowed us to serve that broader population of kids in the communities and really meet them where they were at. And I hope and advocate that we just continue to build upon the success that we've seen during this time. Maya, I know you've got a ton of research. I'm always looking at your numbers.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear from you too.
Yeah, so I will just, agree that our numbers, we have surveyed our network and we continue to do so often just to check in and really note like what has been the impact of waivers across, communities, rural communities. So our numbers have significantly increased since the start of the pandemic. And right now we're analyzing our numbers, but happy to report out after we analyze. But what I will say, and Stacey, I think that you've hit it on the nose, is partnerships have been crucial and key. So our networks have been able to partners with WISE and partners with school districts and so many different partners to leverage these programs. And so what's been beautiful about this all is to really like document these practices and be able to say like, hey, this is what's going on now and how can we look toward the future, or how can we continue these efforts, not just alone as food banks, but how can we partner with so many different agencies and other crucial partners across all service areas. So it's just been really amazing to see just the innovation that has been implemented across our food banks and what that looks like. And again, just appreciate the partners here on this call, how we've been able to really leverage our networks together and working hand in hand to really take note of how impactful these waivers have been.
Definitely. I think just kind of building on all of this and summarizing a bit, it's been a little bit all over the map, and we know for some schools that were used to that captive daily audience in the building, it has been extremely tough. And we know it's also been tough for a lot of other sponsors and operators too, but there have also been some amazing bright spots where there have been great partnerships where people have really been able to take advantage of the waiver. So it's not a one thing across the board. And while we haven't done the formal analysis and reports that Frack has done, or have a survey of our network like Stacey or Maya would have, in looking at some USDA data for summer specifically, we have seen a bit of an increase for summer 2020 compared to previous summers, which I think indicates, where you never really have as much of a captive audience in the summer, these waivers and these partnerships have been really beneficial, even if the reach of summer meals overall is still woefully inadequate, at least a little bit better from how it often is where you don't have something like school where every kid is there every day. So thank you so much for that question. Clearly, we all have a lot to say about all of this. Another question we have is, not every kid is going to be able to go back to summer programming where they may have had it in the past. So what are some resources where people can continue to engage kids alongside meals, even if they don't have that formal programming? I don't know if anyone has something they want to kick off with for that. While you come off mute, I will share, we do have some ideas and things to get started with for both print activities, if you want to do printables in bulk meal kits, as well as some different virtual activities that if you want to share a link out, on your website or on your social media, or to print out links to go along with meals, even though that doesn't work quite as well. To be able to give people some direction with some activities they can do on their own, which we did have a teacher look at those things to verify that they were like actually educational activities. So we have that on our website and can share that. And we're looking at doing some more. But I don't know if anyone else has other things that they would want to share on that.
Carolyn, we've seen some really creative ideas coming across in communities. One, kind of building up that virtual engagement as well. We've seen WISE, like the Armed Services, Y in El Paso, Texas, they would send home activities in the weekly meal bundles, and then they would have a live Friday event on Facebook Friday night where the kids could log in. They would have hundreds of kids logging in to share the art projects that they had made during that week and talk about them with one another. So it's still that social connection interaction and hands-on learning that we're all hungry for. We've seen the Rome Floyd Y in Georgia. They are actually partnering up, and they've had some donors come in to help support it too, but they send home STEM enrichment activity kits with their meal packs. And again, it just gives that opportunity. We've also seen when folks are doing those weekly bundles, if you're sending home produce that might not be kind of the common variety, maybe you've got some spaghetti squash, eggplant, kiwis, can you send home recipe cards that have a QR code that can then link to a video of someone preparing that food to help families think through what all you could do with that? We've seen that be really popular when places are giving out those farmer to family boxes to just engage your kids in the kitchen and get them excited about healthy eating. So lots of opportunities to still have enrichment, even if you're not in person.
Yeah, and Stacey, I just want to, definitely say, like with the recipe cards, with so much of the produce going out, and Stacey, we've talked about this before, but the recipe cards, our network puts recipe cards and when they're distributing produce boxes so that families can go home and cook with their children, and it helps them walk through like, hey, did you know you could use a potato like this versus like this? So in addition to recipe cards, assistance around SNAP resources, coloring sheets. Like we've seen some innovative kind of resources that have gone home to children and families, especially throughout this time with everything going on. So yes, recipe cards have definitely been a popular favorite.
Yeah, I love that. And I would just say too, I just saw someone put in the chat theme days on distribution days, which I think is such a cool idea. And I would just add to that, I mentioned a little bit about, this amazing opportunity for out of school time funding and relief from COVID. So I think there's just going to be a lot of possibility there. And I would say too, like in addition to YMCA's, many Boys and Girls Clubs and Parks and Rec, they're still providing, virtual services, perhaps some level of in-person. So definitely, continuing those partnerships. And then if you have a state out of school time group in your state, they are amazing resources, and many of them are doing meal access work. So there could be an opportunity to collaborate there. But yeah, No Kid Hungry, their worksheet with all the ideas is great. I know Alliance for a Healthier Generation has some really great resources, and I know even many like state agencies have been providing links to different activities that can happen. So perhaps as follow-up, we can share more of those. But I think people are being very innovative and just seeing how important it is to have that component alongside the meals, which has been really exciting to see.
Yeah, gotta keep things fun, keep it interesting. Great, and thanks. And please do put things in the chat and we can share it out even if other people can't always see what's in the chat. So we love hearing your different ideas. Another question is, without the SFSP meal pattern, any resources to support meeting the meal pattern and maintaining meal quality this summer? I'll start and say we did host a webinar recently on meal quality, so we can share a link to that recording, but certainly welcome any other ideas on this one, since we are not really the experts on cooking and procurement, especially in this challenging environment.
Yeah, well, I can jump in and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues. But I mean, we know how important meal quality can be. We want to make sure that children are continuing to come back to the meal sites, but we also recognize, like Carolyn, you just mentioned, it is a very different time and capacity is different. Both meals make things different. So I think those things kind of go hand in hand, but keeping in mind that meal quality is something that's so important to keeping participation up. So what we've been talking about is like looking ahead to the summer. Are there small changes that can be made to menus if maybe you're surveying families and certain things aren't working, like swapping out fresh produce if possible, partnering with local farmers who may, be in an opportunity to partner more than they have been before. And then just working with your peers to maybe take a look at their menus, working with your state agency to see any ideas that they have. So that would be my 2 cents there. And I'll turn it over to Maya and Stacy if they have any insight.
Yeah, I would say the biggest piece, especially with our food banks, is, especially when it comes to milk quality, there's most likely during the summer, always a surplus of produce that food banks are getting in, and they need to get out the door very quickly. So as we think about watermelons, as we think about strawberries, and so what our food banks have been have really strategized on, like, working with partners. So for instance, if a food bank is getting so much produce and they have to get it out very quickly, they partner with Wise, and they've set up some fun distribution models where not only are, you know, families who are connected with our food banks receiving produce, but also Y families. So there's just been some innovative kind of practices where our food banks have prioritized meal quality, and, you know, especially given the surplus of produce that always comes in, but I have also partnered with other community sponsors to get that produce out the door quickly as well. So Stacey, I don't know if you wanted to note that, but there's definitely been a strong kind of partnership with produce between both of our organizations.
Absolutely, Maya. And we always appreciate fresh produce. The kids, the families love it. So the YMCA has our HEPA standards, healthy eating, physical activity standards. I shared those in the chat box. You can check it out. But there's also a range of activities and learnings, bright spots from across the country. I will share, Maya, building upon that teen hunger report, we saw the Hockomock area YMCA over the summer do teen cooking classes online virtually. And all the kids that were engaged in it also got the cooking equipment that they would need, which was a really fun way to be excited about it. But I think, you know, too often we tend to get distracted. And I think it's important, as we're talking about free meal programs, that we realize we need to make every bite count. If we are serving families and this is what they're relying on for their nutrition, we want to make every bite count for them and serve the most nutritious and delicious options that are available. It matters when we look at health outcomes and know that they're tied to the quality of food that we eat. If you're on a limited budget, you tend to purchase foods that are calorie rich, but nutrition dense because it's more affordable. So how do we really change that and increase access across the country to that healthy produce, to good quality food, and get folks engaged in it? The New Jersey YMCAs have actually formed farmers markets and are working to pilot SNAP dollars with those for families as well. Again, just increasing access points in communities that may not have grocery stores and places, you know, within easy distance to purchase those foods, and just making it accessible. So lots of great work that can happen here, and I'm excited to see how we continue to grow in this space.
Carolyn, do you mind if I jump in here with a couple more tips? First, I want to highlight in the chat, we've got someone sharing that parent Zoom cooking demonstrations are a great way to help families know how to make use of the produce and bulk items shared. And also adding that activity component, piggybacking off of the last question, as well as some tips to share with families around preserving produce and not letting it go to waste. So ideas around pickling and juicing and smoothies and jams and jellies. And as a reminder for accessibility, posting those recordings online if you do any demonstrations. So those are great tips. And I also want to highlight, as part of the meal quality conversation, if I guess some of my favorite sponsors are looking to the cultural favorites in their communities and learning how to make those recipes or what ingredients go into those recipes. So one example comes out of North Carolina and Charlotte. The sponsor is Our Bridge for Kids. They're an after-school meal sponsor, and they were serving a Burmese population but didn't have any Burmese staff on board to talk about what meals and recipes they wanted to see in the meals program. And so they actually hired a mom from the Burmese community, and she serves on their team now, and also took the team shopping at a local grocery store that the Burmese families in their community frequented to show them this is exactly like the brands that we like and the types of food that come in our recipes that we'd love to make at home and we'd love to receive from you. So I always am an advocate of putting it back to your community and asking what they want to see on the menu, what they like, doing surveys and taste testing. And if it's within your means, bringing someone on from your community if you can't answer those questions yourself as a staff or a volunteer or a board member. So I'll share a little resource. I know we're sharing tons of resources in the chat here, but Our Bridge for Kids and their program and that story is featured on page 2 of the resource that I'm sending here.
Great. Thank you for so many great ideas, everyone. We have just a few minutes left. So last question is, how can people on the call today help to raise awareness now that we, again, have the waivers, we're able to plan for summer? How can we use that to be able to start raising awareness and make sure families know that they'll be able to continue to get these meals?
Yeah, and I'll kick us off. And I will say to that point, you know, you've heard how crucial these waivers are, not just now and how crucial they will be moving forward. But the biggest thing, and I want to continue to express, is the power in partnership. So we cannot do it alone. We can't do it by ourselves. And I think that in order to continue to uplift our voice and to, you know, express the importance of these waivers, we all need to come together. And really just express the importance of, without these extensions or without this particular waiver, this is how my community will be impacted. This is how the families in my community will be impacted. So, you know, one thing I will note is the power in partnership. The second thing I will note is there's so many great resources out there. So if you want to learn more about the waivers and how they have impacted all communities, we've all shared links in the chat box, and I will share links in the chat box as well. But to read and to research and to learn more about the impacts of these waivers. And the third thing I will say is, within your states, within your community, if you have the opportunity to be part of committees or to be part of sign-on letters or whatever that looks like, raise your hand and participate. Be a part of sign-on letters, be a part of conversations where folks are really expressing the importance of these waivers, because without our voice, USDA won't hear us and other decision makers won't. So it's so important that we work together. And again, I'm so happy to be joined by the partners on the call today. So I'll toss it over to Clarissa.
Great, thanks, Maya. Yeah, well, I would just echo that, and I would just, you know, looking back at this last year, it has been so tough for so many sponsors and schools, but there have been so many innovative things coming out of it too. And I think, you know, looking forward towards like child nutrition reauthorization, so many things that we've all identified as possibilities have actually been in place this last year. So how do we leverage what we have moving forward? And I would just say, we had a partner in Rhode Island who every year they do a marketing and awareness campaign. And, you know, they had really high participation compared to other states, but they did a survey of families who were coming to their summer meal sites this last summer. And many of them, I can't remember the percentage, but majority were saying that they've never heard of summer meals before. And I think just like kind of reframing it, and how do we take what we have now and making sure families know about it, but, you know, continuing on to maintain participation. So yeah, I would just echo Maya. Thanks for having us. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to Stacy to close us out.
Thank you. So, you know, I would just continue to say, use your voice, and your local voice matters so much. Sometimes we think you have to be the CEO and this really high up person. No, your voice matters. Your stories matter of what's happening in your community. Share them with your state agency, with your members of Congress, to call for change, for these waivers to extend. But, you know, I also just want to continue to say it's so important how we message this in our local communities. We were on a CCFP conference, and one of the school nutrition directors shared this really lovely flyer, and it completely changed things. It started with, "No, seriously, take the meals." And then it explained there was plenty of food available, that you taking those meals actually helped keep school nutrition workers employed. It gave all these lists, that it also increased your access to healthy food. It wasn't saying that you couldn't afford it. It was just saying like, hey, help out your community. That change, we shared that, one of our YMCAs in North Carolina, it was the most viewed and shared post they had ever had in their organization's history. How we message this matters. This is a humbling issue for so many families, and we need them to see, like, this is there to support them. And it also supports our local communities too. So I love that really changing the message and just welcoming more families to engage, getting more parent advocates as well to talk about food programs, invite their friends. We know word of mouth is critical, but also how we message it, how we put this out in our communities really matters.
Thank you so much for that, Stacy. That's a really critical reminder here as we wrap up. So thank you all so much again for your time on a Friday afternoon. Thanks especially to Maya, Stacy, Clarissa, and Emily for sharing so many great stories and insights. We really appreciate it. So we will share out this recording afterward. Thank you all again so much, and don't hesitate to reach out to any of us if you have questions once you think about what this all means for you this summer. Thanks. Bye.